Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today, Beyond Protocol Results, Why and How to Analyze End User Experience in a Load Test. So just before we start, I want to go over some housekeeping items. So this session is being recorded, so we'll make sure to send you the recording at the end of this webinar session. If you have to hop out anytime, feel free to do so. We'll make sure to send that over to you. If you have any questions during the session, there's a Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. Just click it, put in your question. We'll make sure to answer your question throughout the webinar session. If for some reason we're unable to get to your question on the session, then we'll make sure to follow up with you directly. So at this time, I'll pass over to Elliot, who's going to be giving you an intro to SmartBear, as well as take you through the session.
Thanks so much, Mary. So just want to give you a brief background as to the company that is bringing you this webinar today. So here at SmartBear, we were founded in 2009. Although we're broadcasting here from our Somerville, Massachusetts headquarters, we have 11 offices around the world. And with our wide diversity of products, we have over 6.5 million users. That translates to over 22,000 customers. And whether you're using one of our paid for solutions or one of our open source solutions, we really try to cover a wide array of products, and we support that with over 525 employees staffed throughout our offices around the world. So, although we'll be talking about Load Ninja specifically today, we just want you to know that, whatever stage of the software development lifecycle you're at right now, we try to have a SmartBear product supported for you. And whether it's in the design, creation, testing, or even the monitoring, we have a product in our portfolio for you. And we even cover and integrate with a lot of open source or deployment monitoring systems as well. So, my name is Elliot Landon. I'm a solutions engineer here at SmartBear. I'll pass it over to my colleague Keshav, who's our product manager for the Load Ninja tool, and he'll really give a brief background about what we'll be discussing on the webinar today.
Thank you so much for that great introduction, Elliot. And I'm Keshav. I'm the product manager on the performance side at SmartBear Software. And today we'll essentially be taking a deep dive into understanding the importance of the end user analysis when your application server is under stress. That'll be our primary focus today. We'll really go beyond the traditional protocol-based results and understand, the protocol-based results are useful, but there's an element beyond that exists, especially in today's hyper-competitive world, that we need to be thinking about. So the agenda is really understanding what we're looking for in a load test, talking through the advantages of using real browsers, trying to go through some key metrics that we'd want to look for in a browser-based load test, and finally go through a demo. So let's start by talking through what are we looking for in a load test. Now, we've all been part of software development teams. I'm sure everyone in the audience is part of some engineering team or is part of an engineering organization into some capacity or knows someone in an engineering capacity. Performance testing, unlike functional testing, has always stemmed from a business requirement. We deal with a lot of customers, and we've been in the performance testing space for us in SmartBear for over 10, 15 years now. And many of the customers and clients that we deal with, it's the need for performance testing starts when you realize that something's broken, right? So it always stems from a business requirement, business need, when you realize something's broken and that's resulted in loss in dollars. For example, these are some hard statistics that we've seen in the market. Like a 1-second delay in a page response can result in 7% reduction in conversions. We see that 40% of people abandon a website if it takes over 3 seconds to load. We're just so used to seeing so many websites. If it's taking long to load, we as consumers just leave. And we see this result exponentially increase or depending on how you look at it, amplify when you're talking about e-commerce, where every step of the funnel counts. There's a lot of losses in e-commerce websites, primarily due to performance issues. Like, for example, a 2-second delay during a sales transaction can result in abandonment rates of over 80%. So performance testing is really important, and you want to make sure your application is performant and can handle today's growing expectations from website and web application end users on standards of performance. Right, so what exactly is performance testing? Just a level set. This is the traditional definition, right? Performance testing is a process of determining the speed, responsiveness, and stability of a computer network, software program, or device under workload. It's understanding the stability of it. But if you want to trace it back to the business case I just mentioned before, it's a human problem, right? You want to understand essentially when your application is under stress, when there's a bunch of concurrent users using your application, how is their experience overall from us from in when they're using and going through the transactions, right? Are they able to satisfactorily experience your web application across all your different pages, across all the pages that your UX team, your developers have taken time to build in the most best and happy and satisfactory experience possible, and you're meeting those SLAs that they expect. Your page is loading under 3 seconds. You're able to see the modal that your developers had built in under 2.5 seconds, whatever those SLAs are and whatever the expectation your end consumers have, right? You have to trace it back to the real human element to this. So so if that is really the business case, let's understand how does the end user actually experience your web application, right? If you're talking about web applications, it's primarily through the browser. So, if you talk to, like, for example, what the browser is essentially this wrapper around a bunch of different things underneath it. So, for example, there's a user interface that has all the address bar, the back and the forward buttons, the menu and all those things that you see typically. Behind this is the actual engine that marshals all the actions between the UI and the actual rendering engine. The rendering engine is actually responsible for displaying the requested content from your application server. So if you have, like, for example, HTML and CSS, it parses that. Then you have the networking aspect, and this is where you for network calls such as HTTP requests using different implementation for different platform behind any sort of interface. You have your UI backend that's drawing widgets, and also you have your JavaScript interpreter that's used to parse JavaScript and parse and execute JavaScript code. So there's this wrapper that's doing all of these wonderful things before you as the end user actually see the web application, right? And underneath this is where you actually go through the protocol-based request response cycle, right? So if you as the end user decide to say search for like twitter.com, right? What happens is you first have to do a DNS lookup, right? So an HTTP request is sent to the web server, which has the IP address, and there's a DNS lookup that happens. Then once you've identified it, then there's a TCP handshake that then eventually finds the actual application server. You go and execute the business logic, and an associated HTTP response gets sent back to the browser, which then gets rendered and parsed and visualized for you, right? So this is the process of like how you would essentially go ahead and your end users come in and interact and use your application. So when you think of like the typical, now coming back to how load testing has always been done, if you think back into how the typical protocol-based load testing tool works, is if I take a standard example, like say for example, like a tool like JMeter, for example, right? JMeter is I personally am a huge fan of JMeter. I've used it in the past, and it's a very wonderful, it's a good community-driven project, and we at SmartBear are big advocates for open source, and we truly thank the community for building this. But when it comes to the protocol-based approach, you look at you typically test the protocol layer behind the actual application, behind the actual browser. So, for example, you think of like testing and tracking the response rates for the HTTP layer. You might be thinking about, like, for example, the SOAP layer, which is a messaging protocol that allows for distributed elements, typically in an API-based communication. You might be thinking of like doing like testing a database to the JDBC drivers, right? So or like the messaging interface, or even like the services like the POP3 or SMTP, and even the FTP services. So there could be all these different protocols that you want to test. But fundamentally, tracing it back to the business case, it's really the end user experience that you really want to be testing. And you, at the end of the day, many of the protocol-based tests that you run, which is like for the HTTP or HTTPS layer, is to correlate that to at some level to the end user experience. Now, when you get a protocol-based result, right, this is what you'd be seeing. I have intentionally covered the actual domain names in orange, just because this is an actual client of ours, and we don't want to be exposing the actual domain. But this is essentially, this is what you'd be getting for a simple web-based transaction. You're going to be getting all the different chit chat, the times for all the chit chatter that go through between the server and the client, right? Which is, if you recall in my previous slide, that's all the HTTP request and response data. And this is going to be a voluminous amount of information that you have to understand, comb through, and somehow correlate with the actual end user experience. But if you recall, this is not actually the end user experience, because there's this other layer right in front of it that is a browser. And it doesn't, this experience, that this results that you see does not take into account the time it takes for the browser to process, construct, paint, and render the DOM. It doesn't take into account all the times, like for example, the JavaScript interpreter is using to parse and execute the JavaScript code, for the networking aspect to it, for you to understand the HTTP requests and paint your go through the rendering agent and paint your actual DOM layer, right? So it doesn't take into account all of that, and it's purely giving the chit chatter experience, the results of the chit chatter between the server and the client. So coming back to this, what truly is the determining factor of the end user experience is actually the browser, right? Load testing with the real browser somehow actually accomplishes two things. One, it gives you automatically the end user experience, right? Because it tells you on average, if say, for example, under a load of like 1,000 users, you realize that a page takes, with using real browsers, you realize that a page takes 2 seconds to load. That means if there's a real user on the other end of the application, it's taking them 2 seconds to see that, whatever that transaction is, whatever the button is, whatever you are expecting the end user to see. There is no question, there's no like guessing game. It's not an approximation. This is the truest form of results that you can ever see. And two, the browser automatically takes into account the HTTP requests and responses, because you're not going to be painting anything on the browser side. You're not going to be rendering the page without getting the response from the actual application server and from the web server. So automatically, you're taking into account that aspect as well. So really, load testing with the real browser is probably gives you the most holistic understanding of your overall end user experience in the platform. So, if you think about like important metrics that you need to be thinking through from an end user performance metrics perspective, you have things like the redirect time, right? So this is, if once you remember, I talked about how you go to the address bar, you search for a specific website, and so on. So if tracing myself from that end user perspective, this is the time, if the tested website has any sort of initial redirects, this is the time it would take for you to get that redirect and go to the URL. Then there's the DNS time, the time spent to do an actual DNS lookup. Time spent to the connect time, which is time spent to perform an actual TCP handshake, which is, establishing a connection to the web server after the DNS lookup. Then there's, time to first byte. Then there's the response time between, when the client sends a request until when the HTTP code gets downloaded. Then there's the processing time, and finally there's the event time as well. All of this is from the browser's perspective, which means this has a special implication for the overall experience the end user has, which is something you need to be thinking through as well. So for example, if say the DNS time is taking too long, you could imagine that there might be an issue with the DNS server. If say, for example, the response time is taking too long, there might be an issue in your backend server. If say the DOM load time is taking too long, maybe there's some very heavy code or heavy client-side CSS or fonts or images that you have that is causing it to behave abnormally when your application is under load versus when it's not. Right? So these are some of the interesting things that you can obtain when actually going to the browser. So the good news so far is that when you're actually going through the browser-based approach of running a load test, you also experience certain additional secondary effects, secondary benefits of going through this. The first benefit is essentially overcoming challenges with scripting. Typically, when you think of performance testing, it's always thought of as something which either you need to spend a lot of time outside of your agile development and testing cycles, because it requires its own effort involved in scripting, and two, you'd have to have a special knowledge that is outside of the typical QA person's domain. All right, you have to go through like a learning curve of even understanding how you'd program a load test script. Then you'd have to get it ready for playback. So it's a hard process essentially to keep up with your agile team, which is why performance testing, unfortunately, even though it's a need, is only done once every quarter sometimes, or even once every 6 months, or maybe you decide to forgo it and just do it once a year. So the solution, if you actually use a real browser-based approach, what happens is you can essentially, if for many tools that use like load testing tools that allow you to execute browser-based load tests, you can essentially drive the browser as part of your test script to record and instantly play back your scripts. What I mean by that is, if you're using a browser-based load testing tool, you can record, you can essentially point and click at your application, which Elliot will show you in a minute, interact with it like how your end user would, and during playback, not go through any of the the tedious programming that you would otherwise do if you were doing through a protocol-based approach, because there is no requirement for you to like understand, for example, session IDs in your HTTP requests and responses, understand what are the dynamic things that have changed in your HTTP request and response cycle, go through program and correlate to make sure all the cookies are in sync. You don't have to go through any of that. It's essentially recording an instant playback. The other good thing about this approach is that if there's any sort of client-side business logic, and this is very common if you're using React or Angular or any of the the applications which have a lot of client-side logic, business logic, that those applications don't have any sort of interactions between the server, which means there's no HTTP request response cycle. So if you're using a regular protocol-based tool, it might take you might have to do additional scripting. You'd have to essentially add more script. You and your testing team have to like essentially go through the har file and essentially identify what is the client-side logic that exists. With a browser-based approach, you don't have to go through any of that, because automatically, because you're driving the browser, you're doing everything else underneath that. And the browser is essentially abstracting the process of programming and correlating and things like that. The secondary benefit is essentially the translation process, right? So typically in the protocol-based approach, you've seen the results I've showed you in the previous slide, right? You get all the chit-chat between the server and the client, but that's good, but it doesn't necessarily help you identify which is a specific thing that you need to be paying attention to, right? So typically the QA person has to spend more time translating the results in a way that's actionable for your development team. And so with the with the browser-based approach, what happens is you also get developer-friendly browser-based nav timings information, like the DOM load time, the DNS time, and the time to first byte, and things like that. That gives you a more holistic understanding of, which is this, how is my application doing, but also gives you actionable metrics that your developers are typically used to using, right? Developers, at the end of the day, to debug applications, use browser-based metrics as well. So this is essentially giving you that perspective from the browser side, which makes it a little more easier for you to go through the process of handing it off to your development team to debug and diagnose issues. So how do you actually load test at scale with real browsers? So typically while the benefits I've just showed you has been known for like about 10 years, I would think, especially when Chrome became very popular. From the perspective of scaling, it's been really hard, right? So that's the reason why to this day, some of the tools that to some degree advertise browser-based load testing will only limit you to maybe 100 or 200 real browsers because of issues about scalability, because of issues of capacity, and so on. So really a true browser-based approach in an ideal world would allow you to scale to tens of thousands of real browsers. Luckily, there is a platform for doing this, and that is Load Ninja. And so Load Ninja is essentially this performance testing platform on the cloud to test web applications at scale using real browsers. And the good thing in this approach is that this is happening at scale. So be it 1 user or 10 users or 10,000 users, every single user corresponds to a real browser. So you can actually rest assured that you're going to be getting the most truest representation of load on your application in any load test period. And also, a flip side to this is as you the results that you get back as well is something that you're going to be is going to be the truest understanding of your end user experience, because you're going to be getting it all from the browser's perspective. So as a byproduct of using Load Ninja, some of the efficiency gains we've seen our customers experience is an increase in efficiency, because you're not spending days or weeks getting the scripts ready for playback. You're not talking to your developers to identify what is the different dynamic components of your application. You're just instantly recording and playing back. There's the accuracy aspect, which is true load. It's the truest representation of load. And then finally, you get the actionability aspect, which is get real browser-based performance data that you can and you can also inspect and debug errors in real time. Of course, you can also automate this load testing process, which is something we always recommend, right? You want to essentially periodically load test as you add more and more changes to your application, and set your baseline and make sure you're meeting your SLA standards, right? So you can always, like for example, with our public REST API or Jenkins plugin, you can always automate your real browser-based load testing as well if needed. So with that said, I'm going to be handing it off to my colleague here, Elliot, who will be walking you through the demo. And essentially in the demo, we're going to be essentially focusing on telling you the benefit, showing you how how things differ from the protocol approach versus the real browser-based approach across scripting, as well as the true reason why we're all here, which is understanding the end user experience and the load test results as well. So I'm going to hand it off to Elliot, and you can go from there. Oh, and we just have a quick poll over here to just get a sense of how experienced are you guys in performance testing. So before we start this demo, this could just be a useful indicator for us to know how we should go through the demo process over here.
All right, thank you so much, Keshav. And if everybody can just fill out that poll, that way it just helps us understand your background when it comes to performance testing, and we can kind of tailor this webinar accordingly, just based on your background. All right, so we're going to contextualize the JMeter and the Load Ninja comparison in terms of this pet store application. As you can see, it's an extremely simple and modest e-commerce application that we use for demo purposes. Here you can log in, specify a username and password, or even search for any one of our 16 products contained within the pet store. So we'll kind of use this as a baseline comparison when recording both from the protocol level within JMeter, as well as really honing in on the true end user experience and capturing this from the browser perspective within Load Ninja. So when leveraging a protocol-based recorder using JMeter, it is an extremely powerful open source tool, and it really allows us to gain a granular level of detail into the APIs and the how to load test the specific URL, get and post responses as well. So let's go ahead and take a look. And if I just switch my screen here, we can see JMeter now. And all of those websites that we visited with the sign-in page are all captured from the protocol level. And we can see that they're assigned to a separate HTTP request in every single step of this recording. Now, while JMeter can get us some granular level of detail and really provide a detailed view of what is going on at at scale when we load test our web application, we're really leaving out the end user experience component here. So clicking the login button, while it takes us to the the sign-in page, when users are interacting with that page, they have to wait until the username and password text boxes appear before even trying to enter their username and password respectively. Also, clicking on the sign-in button, while it takes us back to the home page, we have to wait until that appears. And it really, this is where we start to see the strain within JMeter, because we really either have to know how to use the tool out of the box and how to integrate it with our web application, and really provide those detailed calls and set that up as a part of our load testing, as a part of our load testing test plan here. Additionally, with the ongoing rise of JavaScript calls, especially if you go to Google and you type in a search, and if we implement that same sort of functionality in the pet store where you search for a product, there might be a did you mean if you type in golden, it might auto-populate golden retriever based on what you're currently typing in. So there's some JavaScript calls that are going on behind the scenes, and it becomes increasingly difficult to manage this simple login, logout transaction at scale unless we're very familiar with JMeter right out of the box.
Not just that, to add to Elliot's point, it's also like you have to essentially intimately know the application as well, because fundamentally you're going to the protocol layer. So which means any sort of dynamic parts, as Elliot will show you over here, like things like the session IDs, cookies, and things like that, you have to know intimately as to what is changing, what is not changing, which typically involves showing multiple instances, running multiple instances of the same transaction, copy pasting all the requests, all the response from the server, pasting them side by side for each of these transactions, and understanding what has changed.
So now we'll view this workflow in the context of Load Ninja and how we can really use the baseline knowledge of just how to interact with your web application and use that knowledge to record and play back a simple web test without any coded layer, without dynamically allocating session IDs or client-side JavaScript. This can all be done from the browser perspective. So just as I open a separate tab here and type in a URL for our pet store application, that's essentially the same knowledge we need to get started here. And we can go ahead and click record and enter that URL here. So now we'll see it essentially an embedded browser, and this is because Load Ninja records on a real web browser. So now, just as we click the login button before, logged in using our credentials, and since it's recording from the browser level, we're waiting until everything is loaded until we can interact with it. Now, this enables the tester to really accurately capture the end user experience without having to go back through the code and dynamically modify any variables, some session IDs, or even client-side JavaScript. So something that Load Ninja does is that we record on a new browser every time. This also abstracts the cache and the cookies every time. So we're really, getting the truest form of load and the most accurate results that correspond with our end user experience. And now, in order to verify any test, whether it is in JMeter or here in Load Ninja, you have to play back your recording to ensure that it can be used at scale. So you're not going to see any code layer. You'll just see the specific pages that are automatically correlated for you, along with all of the actions that took place on those specific pages. So Load Ninja will play this back in exactly the same time manner that it took to record, and you can easily randomize these think times in between each steps in order to better model or accurately capture the end user behavior.
Elliot, it's someone, a webinar listener saying that your voice is not clear. Maybe you want to check your mic again?
Sure. Is this better? Okay. All right. So, also want to talk about how we can, modify existing web tests. So as your application grows, as your application evolves, your UX team is going to do some more research, and they might, talk with the developers, and they might change the coded layer that will in turn change, some UI components of your application. So let's say that we need more people logging into the pet store application, and the developers decide to change the location of the login button to be where it was previously in the header of the application. It's now being centrally located here in the body. So before in JMeter, we would have to go to this specific request, and we would somehow have to modify where we're interacting with this login button. And there's really not a intuitive out-of-the-box way to do it with an open source solution. But within Load Ninja, since we are recording on a real web browser, we have access to the elements at the document object model level. So this will enable us to just, navigate to our new production site, capture the updated XPath, optimize XPath of the CSS class, and just insert it and tell LoadNinja how to modify how it sees that individual item, and then just update the associated variables. So this way, any changes that are made to the UI layer can easily be accommodated and updated in our existing workflow.
Naveen just asked, can you give us a demo of the data-driven aspect of the load test? And Elliot is actually going to go right to that right now.
Absolutely. So we'll save this as a login, logout transaction. And then, what we can do is here we search for one specific set of username and implemented one specific password. So let's say you had a data bank, a CSV file full of username and password combinations, or what we'll show here is searching for one specific product. And as I alluded to before, the pet store contains 16 distinct products. It would not be extremely time efficient to record 16 different use cases. So instead, we can take a recording once, capture the initial search query and abstract not only this, but the resulting page that will be displayed. And then any events that take place on this page, if we're interacting with a particular object, we can also abstract that and allow the user to data drive it from a CSV file. So simple search and then navigating back to the home page. What we can do now is add a data bank file, whether it be in that CSV or TXT format. It will be from our local machine. And after telling LoadNinja how the file is formatted, we can see a quick preview of the file just to validate that it does display all of the elements contained within the file and that it uploaded it correctly. And this is where LoadNinja will display the originally captured input. So if we recorded a sign-in process, we would see the initial username and passwords that were recorded. Here, we're looking to differentiate the initial search that was captured. So when we originally searched for golden retriever, we're going to map that to the product column of our pet store CSV file. So an interesting feature of LoadNinja is that we also have the ability to capture that initial URL that we input and data drive it from a CSV or TXT file. So this is increasingly important because at the end of the day, most testers are testing on some sort of pre-production environment, and we're basing the changes on our production environment on the metrics and the results that are returned based on our model of that production environment. So it might be prudent once every quarter, once every year, just to run the results in the production environment to ensure that the results that we get back from the pre-production environment that we may run on a weekly or even monthly basis align with the results that we're basing those changes off of. So in this manner, we can ensure that although we recorded this test in one specific environment, say a pre-production, we can upload a TXT file with a new production environment and run through these exact same transactions without having to re-record.
So Thomas asks us, LoadRunner uses correlation to sync up encryption dates, session IDs, and other dynamic data. How does LoadNinja accomplish this? So Thomas, to answer your question, in what Elliot just showed you is essentially taking a real browser. What you're seeing on Elliot's screen is an actual real browser that's and it's the truest. It's a real browser that it's not a Chromium or anything else. It's actually a real browser that we spin up. That is essentially capturing all those transactions, and during playback, we're actually driving the browser to go through those actions. So it's not the protocol there, so which means there is no actual, from the tester's perspective, there is no need to sync up encryption dates, session IDs, and any of those dynamic data, right? It's all LoadNinja just automatically handles that because the browser abstracts you from doing any of those manual tasks.
All right. So, in addition to, data driving tests, we can also add some sort of shift left mentality into the, load testing tool here. So in this manner, we can create small functional tests at the same time that we're performing and doing our load test. So through our validation section, if our team's extremely proficient in JavaScript, enabling them to access elements from the document object model level and really allow them to use the syntax and the type of code that they're used to interacting with on a daily basis, they can add some JavaScript validations in this manner. Additionally, we can play back this test, see how it's able to be played back for one virtual user, and then use that as a benchmark to implement SLA validations here within the tool. So if it took a total of 3 seconds to search for a product, and we want to ensure that the user spends no more than 3 seconds on the search page, we can ensure that when we run this load test at scale, be it for 10 virtual users or even 10,000 virtual users, we can ensure that these SLAs are, we adhere to these time thresholds. And if not, Load Ninja will report back to the tester and allow them to seamlessly hand off the information to the development team and interact with these error-prone virtual users to get to the bottom of what's causing these time delays. Lastly, since we do have access to the document object model level, we can also access the underlying elements within the HTML. So we can search for text that should appear, or in that dreaded case of the 404 error text with a broken link, if we want to look for text that should not appear during the load test run, we can enable the tester to add those text validations here. So what we'll do is we'll have this validation set to purposely fail. And because we're searching for a golden retriever every time, we'll notice that since we data drove this test with searching for different inputs, anytime it's searching for anything other than a golden retriever, Load Ninja will be able to log this as an error during the test run. And while testers are getting results back in a live 5-second resolution setting, we can enable the developers to also analyze the any errors that are occurring on their end. So once we have a recording in place, whether it's from the protocol level in JMeter or from the browser level here in Load Ninja, we have to set up some sort of configuration process. So within JMeter, this is where the extra step comes into play, because we have to, since the protocol is really only one segment of what the browser is interpreting, we have to add, the cookies manager, the cache manager, add that DNS manager as well. And so all of these components together, really just emulate a browser at the end of the day. And so while this provides, a good jumping off point, in terms of truly understanding how users and customers are interacting with our web application at the load specified in a load test, it truly just provides an estimate for how they're experiencing the website. So within Load Ninja, we can use the existing real browser recorded scripts. And because we're using real browser technology, we've implemented a way to scale this for the amount of virtual users designated here. So if we say 10 concurrent virtual users or even 10,000, this means that we will spin up 10,000 real 10,000 real browsers on our end. And because we don't mandate that you have to use your computing resources, there's no need to look into the Java virtual machine. There's no need to allocate heap memory on your end. We don't have to use your own local computing resources to emulate a real web browser. At the end of the day, we are launching real web browsers to get you the realest and truest form of load. So because this is an extremely simple pet store application, we don't want to overload it for future demos. So we'll just stick to 10 concurrent virtual users for now. Sorry, K-Job, was there a question?
No, I was just going to say, Naveen's asked us a question regarding how we would scale this to 10 to 20 users in a 5-minute test. So I was just going to say that you're going to be showing exactly that right now.
Mm-hmm. So we can distribute the load accordingly based on how we expect users to interact with our web application. So I know for an e-commerce application, a lot of people aren't logging in and logging out. They're really just searching the site randomly. So we'll make sure that we distribute the load accordingly here. A neat feature that we've recently added within Load Ninja is not only the ability to distribute load across various web tests or recordings, but also distribute the load across different geographic regions. So, again, this just adheres to the philosophy that performance testing at the end of the day is always about modeling end user behavior as closely and accurately as possible. So in this manner, this is one more detail that we add within the Load Ninja tool to really enable you to get the truest form of load. So you can not only ensure that domestic users here in the US are interacting with our application in a timely manner, but maybe seeing if there's any network problems with our overseas users as well. So here in Load Ninja, we have the ability to run an iteration as well as a duration-based test. So for the purpose of this demo, I'll run a 5-minute duration-based test. So this corresponds with running for 5 minutes at the full 10 virtual user load that we previously specified. And if I wanted all my users to start logging into the application at the exact same time whenever I click Save and Run Load Test, then I'll specify one ramp-up step. But if I want users to slowly and gradually, build up to that 10 virtual user load, then I can specify and distribute that load evenly across the 1 minute of ramp up time in 5 equally distributed time intervals. So specifying 5 ramp up steps here kind of translates to every 12 seconds, 2 additional virtual users have been added until reaching that full 10 virtual user load. As I alluded to earlier, if you're within JMeter, you have to add some sort of metric for randomizing think times or modifying how long users are taking in between those requests, because otherwise they'll be firing back to back to back to back, and users usually click some button to induce that API call. Here within Load Ninja, we can override all the recorded think times that were captured in those original recordings and modify them here. So whether it's we want them to be played back to back, or if we'd rather them be randomized to a more accurate way of how users are interacting with the web application, we have that feature here. So lastly, is what we'll see here is the error handling, which really helps if we expect an error to occur and if we want to get the developers involved into the platform. So we can either stop the iteration altogether and go on to the next one, or allow the developers to come onto the platform, and we have a user management section where you can specify new email addresses. And for one licensed platform, each user will be given his or her own separate username and password credentials. And so we can have 5 testers and 5 developers logging in and interacting with the same Load Ninja account and collaborating and recording and modifying tests together in a collaborative manner, as well as debugging and really translating the results from one team to another without any hefty translation process that usually takes place in between the steps. So we'll initiate this test run, and this is where we will start spinning up those real browsers. So during this time, we'll kind of go back to JMeter's end, and we'll see how we can run a test. And one thing that we want to notice right off the bat is that JMeter itself will say, do not run a load test in GUI mode, in the mode that we're currently in. Just because it does consume extra computing resources. This is a 10 concurrent virtual user load, so I'll run it, just for this load test. But we'll see the sort of requests and response and metrics that are returned in the listeners. And so what we'll see right here is, the list of, URL verbs that were accessed during this load test. And it's inherently, unless you're extremely familiar with the tool or have had years of experience in a load testing environment, it's extremely difficult to translate and understand, what's happening with these results. So we're seeing, within each thread, each user is interacting and iterating through each of those steps, but then we have some error-prone virtual users here. And it just traditionally takes a long time to understand, what's going on from the tester's perspective, and now what's going on, having to translate that, take time out of the tester's day to translate it to the developer's perspective.
And there's also, just adding on to what Elliot just showed you, there's also a guessing game involved, because at the end of the day, if you recall, this is showing you the time it's taking for the responses to come from the app server, but it's not necessarily showing you what the end user is actually experiencing as a result of this, right? So there is a level of approximation that you'd have to play in the guessing game in order to translate this in a way that makes sense to developers and hope that your guessing is actually correct. And that essentially takes a lot of time and involvement in the space and understanding your application very intimately, and also understanding the trends that you're seeing in the tool, which typically takes a lot of time, which is again the reason why typically when you think of performance testing, you don't think the tools lend itself very well for agile or DevOps oriented workflows.
So now we'll see how the results are coming in from Load Ninja's perspective. And while the results are coming in on a live 5-second resolution, and you can try Load Ninja out for yourself, we have a free 14-day trial. You'll see this exact same 5-second resolution that I'm seeing now in my internal account. A neat feature that's pretty unique to Load Ninja is that we can interact with the results in a GUI mode. And not only that, but provide a pretty high-level overview of how our tests are being able to run at the load specified. So, let's consider the hypothetical scenario if we don't have a web application, but if we actually manufacture a physical product. So before that physical product is released to the general population, we would go into a marketing studio, get a sample population or a sample group of users and customers together, and kind of see through that two-way glass how they're interacting with the application or with the product, and get some feedback through that. That's exactly what the virtual user inspector is able to do within Load Ninja, but from the web applications perspective. So what we're seeing here is Load Ninja's ability to sample various virtual users that have been configured for this load test run. And similar to how the recorder was able to play back the results under the stress of one virtual user, we can really see, from a high-level overview, how the results are playing back under the stress specified in this load test scenario. So now what this enables us to do is understand, if there's a 5-second time degradation being experienced, on this login page here, we can experience for ourselves, if this application were released to the public today, how long that, would feel like and look like, and see if there's any, if there are any elements that are taking extremely long to load from a visual perspective. So this is a, very unique feature that I think provides a good, one sanity test to ensure that, the results are playing back in the same manner that we recorded them at the scale specified, but it also helps us understand if we release the application to the public today, what would the end user experience look like? So if an error does arise within Load Ninja, instead of mandating that developers wait on testers for the entire load test to end and then take time out of their day to translate it into a format that the developers can then understand, we can enable the developers to come onto the platform themselves and interact with any errors that Load Ninja is able to pick up during the test run. So what we can see here is that we enable the developers with a JavaScript terminal, which really translates to the browser console that they would normally interact with if any errors arise. But now this is occurring at the same time that testers are getting information back on that 5-second resolution. So they can access document elements from the document object model level here and just gain a quick understanding of what's going on, without having the testers to to wait on and wait for them to finish the load test. And so at the end of the day, we specified 3 minutes for LoadNinja to hold any error-prone virtual user in place. And what will expire, as you will see with the grayed out bug feature here, is the ability to interact through that JavaScript terminal. But at the end of the day, any errors that do arise, you'll still have access to a quick screenshot of where the error occurred. You can download the underlying HTML. But additionally, you can see the network traces and how individual elements on this error-prone virtual user page have been able to load under the stress specified. So we can trace the critical path here of all the elements. We can look into any particular one that we're concerned with, and not only look into details with the request, the response, and a breakdown of the timings of each of their components, but as we alluded to before, we don't want to have to, developers don't want to have to wait on the testers to translate the data into a format that they can understand. This is why when we built LoadNinja, we took the testers and developers use case in mind and allowed them to seamlessly see the raw data in the HTTP archive report format that the developers can then use as actionable data to make new iterations to the platform on. So we can easily filter out any scripts that we're not concerned with here. So if I want to, see only the login page, but maybe only focus on the sign-in page itself within the login, logout transaction, we can kind of do an instant comparison here and easily filter out any, metrics that we're not concerned with. And just so we can understand where bottlenecks, where any major bottlenecks are occurring, where any any one page is the main reason that the user is seeing such a heavy time degradation during that user experience or that user transaction.
So one thing I want to add over here is the charts that you're seeing, the first chart, which is script and stub durations. That's essentially showing you in real time the truest form of end user result that you can see, right? For example, at any given instance, say at time t equal to 50 seconds or 30 seconds, whatever time you're seeing over there for a certain page indicates that for when your application is under, say, 500 users or 20 users in this case, or 10 users, the time it takes for a real user to go through all those transactions. So this is not any request response. This is not an approximation. This is really, if there was a real user sitting there going through those transactions, this is how long it would take. Similarly is the nav timings, which is the browser-based metrics that we're collecting, like DNS time, download time, and so on. And you can isolate that from an overall test perspective or from a specific page perspective as well.
So while it's useful to provide and gain an understanding from a visual perspective, we also want to kind of provide, in a more tabular format, the results that are coming in. So this is where, it's important to understand not only how long any one user takes for a particular web test or a particular recording, but how long, what portion of that time was think time or really just end user time thinking about their next step. And then a breakdown of the, the navigation timings as well as the response timings. And in doing so, helping the tester understand, is the error truly on the developer's end? Is it with the way they wrote the code? Or perhaps, is there, a way with the, is there an error with the way the network is handling the application at scale? And in this way, not only providing the information we need to truly understand the end user experience, but really having the insight necessary to make any, further iterations within our internal team's control, but also addressing any external variables and making sure those are attributed to on the shortest possible timeline.
So a couple of points that came up while Elliot was demoing. The first was, whether we show the load gen health. Elliot, do you want to just show the load gen health over here? Yep, so as you can see, we'll give you full understanding of, all the different load generators that we use in the system and also the associated, CPU utilization and so on, and memory and all of that stuff, byte sent and received. There's a question regarding how do you see the HTTP protocol results? And some of you have asked about whether you have to use JMeter on the side or not to get the protocol result. So we actually have a feature that we have in beta right now. that essentially allows you to get the network trace, and actually more than just the network trace, all the asynchronous requests, calls that happen and that are processed by the browser for every single transaction in your page. And we'd be happy to essentially accommodate that as a beta request. And if any of you want to get access to this, if any of you want access to this capability, Mary will be sharing an email address towards the end of the session. Please feel free to reach out to us. I know Naveen, you had that question, and we'll be happy to give you that access to this capability, and you can hopefully get both the best of both worlds. Second, we have a question regarding, whether we will be able to export these scripts in Selenium. So we are based off of Selenium, and we're built on top of Selenium. We currently have the capability to export as Selenium as switched off. We had that in the past. We just turned it off. But we'd be happy if you want. We can if for specific requests, once we understand what the specific request is, we'd be happy to see how we can accommodate that into the platform as well, as needed. So with that said, I think I'm gonna reshare right now real quick before 1 second. Elliot, that was a great demo, and I hope everyone found that useful. I certainly did. It was great questions throughout the session. I think this was a really good engagement, and we value your feedback. And the good thing is everyone in the Load Ninja team are very agile, and we always try to respond to user requests, both in engineering as well as support and sales engineering and so on, the quickest way possible. So if you ever have interesting insights or input as to how we can improve the platform, feel free to reach out to us. Here's the email. You have our Twitter account as well, SmartBear. If you have any specific, if you want to reach out, DM us or anything else like that as well.